Ever feel like you're just drowning in information? You see headlines, data points flying everywhere, but you just want to know, okay, what's really going on? What's the surprising bit? That's what we do here on the deep dive. We take a source, we dig in, and we pull out the insights that matter for you. And today we're tackling an industry many of us probably assume is, well, fading. Printing paper. You'd think in our super digital world, print would be on the way out, right? But we've been looking at a new report. And the numbers tell a very different story, a surprisingly vibrant one, actually.
That's right. We've gone through the Global Printing Paper Market Report 2021-2033. It's from Cognitive Market Research. And our focus today is really unpacking the key numbers, market revenues, growth rates, across regions, countries, looking at 2021, projecting through 2025, and then all the way out to 2033.
Yeah, and crucially, we're not just going to read out a list of figures. We want to explore what this actually means. What does it tell us about global commerce, about consumption, maybe even challenge how you think about paper day to day? Okay, so let's get into it. This surprising story. What does the global picture look like for printing paper right now, according to this report?
Well, globally, the total sales revenue back in 2021 was sitting just under $63 billion. So
Wow.
62.931 billion, to be precise.
Okay, 63 billion. That's already a pretty hefty number.
It is. But what's really fascinating is the projection. It's expected to grow to over 71 billion by 2025.
71 billion.
And then looking further out to 2033, it's projected to reach over $92 billion. $92.298 billion.
Wow. Okay, so it's definitely not shrinking. What kind of growth rate is that?
That reflects a compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of about 3.243% over that whole period.
Yeah.
So steady, consistent growth year on year.
That is genuinely surprising. I mean, I think most people hearing that paper growing consistently for the next decade, it just feels counterintuitive, doesn't it, with everything going digital? How does this square with that narrative? What's driving this?
It really does challenge that simple print is dead idea.
Yeah.
It suggests that, look, despite digital tech being everywhere, there's still a really strong, persistent demand for printed stuff. And we can get into the drivers maybe, but it's things like packaging, education and developing economies, even certain types of marketing.
Right.
And crucially, that demand isn't the same everywhere. The regional breakdown is where it gets particularly interesting. It shows where the big growth spurts are happening.
Okay, let's zoom in then. Given that global growth, where in the world is this trend most pronounced? Where's the action happening?
Well, the standout region is definitely Asia-Pacific. It's got the highest overall growth projection by far.
Okay.
Their sales were around $24 billion in 2021, almost $24 billion. That's projected to climb to nearly $38 billion by 2033, so $37.657 billion.
Huge jump.
It is, and that represents a really strong CAGR of almost 3.9%. 3.844% to be exact.
That's significantly higher than the global average you mentioned. So within Asia Pacific, who are the main players driving that? Is it China? India?
Yeah, both are major contributors. China is the biggest market in dollar terms, starting at about $7.2 billion in 2021 and projected to hit $11.5 billion by 2033. It's a growth rate over 4%.
Still very strong.
Very strong. But India actually shows the highest rate of growth in the region. Its CAGR is projected at 4.6%.
4.6.
Yeah, growing from around $3.7 billion to over $6.3 billion. You often see this, like you said, in places with, rapidly growing economies, expanding education systems.
Makes sense. Textbooks, documents.
Exactly. Physical materials still play a massive role. And it's not just them. We also see really dynamic growth in places like Singapore, over 4.2% CAGR, and Southeast Asia as a whole, around 4.5, 4.6%.
So Asia Pacific is clearly a hotspot. What about North America? Still a big market, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. North America is still a very substantial piece of the pie. It generated nearly $18 billion, $17.872 billion back in 2021.
Right.
And it's projected to grow too, reaching over $24.4 billion by 2033. But the growth rate is steadier, a CGR of about 2.65%.
Okay, so growing but not quite at that Asia Pacific pace. And within North America, the U.S. is obviously the giant, but how do Canada and Mexico compare?
Correct. The U.S. dominates the market share. It was over $14.3 billion in 2021, growing to over $19.4 billion by 2033. But interestingly, its growth rate, about 2.5%, is actually a bit lower than its neighbors.
Oh.
Yeah, Canada shows a stronger projected CDR of over 3.3%, and Mexico's around 2.8%.
That is interesting. Any thoughts on why? Different economic factors, maybe different rates of switching to digital for certain things?
Could be a mix of things, different economic rhythms, perhaps shifts in where certain types of printing, like commercial print or packaging, are happening, maybe different speeds of digital adoption in specific sectors. It points to some nuances within the continent.
Okay, so we've got booming Asia Pacific, steady North America. What's the story in Europe?
Europe's market size was around $12.1 billion in 2021. That's projected to grow to over $16.6 billion by 2033. The average annual growth rate there is about 2.75%, so fairly similar to North America overall.
But Europe's quite diverse economically. Are there big variations between countries there?
Absolutely. This is where you see quite a varied picture. Germany, for instance, stands out with a pretty robust AGR, projected at nearly 3.5%.
Higher than the European average, then.
Significantly higher. It's going from about $2.2 billion to over $3.3 billion. But then you contrast that with, say, Russia.
Okay.
Russia's projected KGR is much lower, only about 1.5%, growing from roughly $750 million to just under $900 million by 2033.
Wow, that's a stark difference. Germany growing strongly, Russia much slower.
It really highlights different internal dynamics, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Economic situations, maybe policy factors, and other major markets fall somewhere in between. The UK is projected around 3.1% growth, France a bit lower at 2.1, 2.2%, Italy around 2.4%. So yeah, a real mix across Europe.
Fascinating. Okay, what about the other regions? South America, Middle East, Africa, are they also part of this growth story?
They are, yes. They contribute to that overall global expansion picture.
Mhm.
South America, for example, is projected to grow from about $3.8 billion in 2021 to over $5.7 billion by 2033. That's an average annual growth of about 3.5%, and Argentina actually leads there with the projected CEGR over 4.1%.
Another high grower.
Exactly. Then the Middle East, starting around $2.5 billion, projected to reach over $3.7 billion by 2033. Again, a solid KGR of nearly 3.5%. And here, the UAE stands out, forecasted over 4% growth. And Turkey, also strong at nearly 3.9%.
Okay. And Africa.
Africa's market was about $2.8 billion in 2021, projected to grow to over $4.1 billion by 2033. The overall CAGR there is a bit lower, around 2.9%, but South Africa within that is projected at a healthier 3.5%.
It's really striking how, even in these regions with smaller overall market sizes, you have specific countries showing growth rates that are, pretty high, sometimes outpacing more established economies. Does that suggest it's tied to a certain phase of development? Or maybe specific local needs for print?
I think it points towards that. Yeah, it could be linked to infrastructure development,
Yeah.
educational expansion, growth in consumer goods, needing packaging,
Yeah.
factors that are maybe more pronounced at certain stages of economic growth.
Okay, so we've gone around the world, seen the numbers.
hmm
What's the big takeaway here? If you had to synthesize this for someone, what does it all mean?
Well, the overarching trend, the main point, is really clear. The global printing paper market isn't dying. It's not even just surviving. It's showing consistent, pretty significant growth projected across basically all regions for the next decade. It just fundamentally challenges that
Yeah.
common narrative. Paper still seems to play a really essential role.
That's definitely the biggest surprise for me and probably for many listeners. We hear digital transformation constantly, yet here's this traditional industry looking solid.
Exactly. And the other key piece is where that growth is strongest.
Right.
While, yes, North America and Europe are huge markets in dollar terms, the rate of growth is highest in Asia Pacific, parts of South America, the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
That signals a real shift in global demand patterns. Emerging markets seem to be the key drivers for the future of this industry. It suggests print is still deeply tied to economic and social development in many parts of the world.
It really makes you reconsider the whole picture, the resilience, the surprising growth. It wasn't what I expected.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with, thinking about this consistent growth projected everywhere. What other forces, maybe less obvious ones, might be quietly keeping the demand for print going strong, even in our digital world? What underlying societal or economic needs is paper still fulfilling?
That's a great question to ponder. As you go about your day, maybe notice where paper still shows up and think about why. Does this data challenge your own assumptions about print versus digital? Something to think about.
Welcome to the deep dive. Most people probably think the printing paper market is, well, Bit of a relic these days, just fading away in our digital world.
Right, seems like an obvious assumption.
But don't be fooled. Our mission today is to really unpack the sources you provided and reveal some surprising forces still shaping this incredibly dynamic industry.
Hmm.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding a market that's, frankly, far from static.
Exactly. We'll dig into what's actually keeping paper demand alive, look at the pretty significant challenges it's up against, especially with digital, and then explore some really exciting new directions it's taking. It's quite a story of resilience.
Okay, so let's kick things off then. What is keeping the printing paper market surprisingly strong?
Hmm.
Where's this demand still coming from?
Well, it's fascinating, actually. Physical documents are still really crucial for a lot of corporate and educational institutions. Despite all the digital tools, think about schools, government offices, businesses,
Yeah.
they still rely heavily on paper, examination papers, for instance, formal reports, critical legal contracts.
Things you need a hard copy for, basically.
Precisely. These aren't easily replaced by screens. Sometimes it's about having that unchangeable record, or even just, the way we learn and remember things physically.
And it's not just official documents, right?
Hmm.
I'm thinking about like commercial printing and packaging. Is that still a big area?
Oh, absolutely. Commercial printing is a huge piece of the puzzle. There's a constant need for specialized papers, think advertising materials, publishing, product labeling.
So like high quality brochures or that really nice packaging for premium products.
Exactly that. The feel of the paper itself can elevate a brand, make it tangible. It offers a connection you don't always get digitally.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
What about the global view? Does the digital divide play into this?
it definitely does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, developing regions are increasingly vital as literacy rates rise and infrastructure like offices expands. Printing and photocopying aren't just optional. They're often fundamental tools for accessing information, for participating in the economy. It's a different reality than in, say, highly digitized economies.
Right, a nuance we might overlook. Okay, so we've talked about what sustains it, but let's be real. The industry faces some major headwinds. What are the biggest challenges here?
The number one restraint, no question, is widespread digitalization. It's just a fundamental shift. We're moving towards e-records, cloud storage, e-books, paperless initiatives are everywhere.
Yeah, less need for physical documents across the board.
Exactly. And then you've got the environmental concerns. Paper
Mhm.
production, it's linked to deforestation. Public awareness is, well, huge now.
And that awareness is really pushing demand for recycled options, isn't it? Making companies rethink things.
It really is. Plus, you can't ignore the instability of raw material and production costs. Wood pulp, chemicals, energy prices, they fluctuate a lot.
Right, things like climate change affecting forests or energy politics.
Precisely. And those fluctuations can disrupt supply chains and mess with pricing. It makes things especially tough for the smaller paper mills trying to compete.
Okay, so with all those challenges,
Hmm.
how is the industry adapting? What are some of those emerging trends you mentioned finding in the materials?
Well, a major trend, and it's really moved beyond being just a nice to have, is the huge shift towards recycled and eco-friendly paper.
Right.
It's becoming almost a standard requirement for procurement now, driven by consumers, yes, but also very much by corporate sustainability goals. It's changing supply chains.
And I've definitely noticed this too, a growing interest in like premium of specialty papers. As maybe everyday printing declines a bit, there's this pivot towards high quality stuff.
Exactly. Think textured papers for luxury packaging, fancy certificates, art projects, even wedding invitations. It's moving towards value-added products that offer something unique, a tactile experience rather than just bulk printing.
So quality over quantity in some areas.
Sort of, yeah. And finally, there's the growth of on-demand digital printing services. That's reshaping things, too.
How so?
These services need really versatile paper types. Papers that can handle high-res images, fast-drying inks, maybe special coatings.
For those quick turnarounds,
Yeah.
like personalized marketing materials or short-run book printing.
You got it. It's all about speed, customization, and the paper needs to support that technology.
So to wrap this up for you listening, based on the sources you sent over, we've journeyed from what keeps the paper market going through its significant hurdles to its, well, surprising adaptability. It's clear this market isn't standing still.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, I think the market's evolution really mirrors these broader shifts in, how we value physical versus digital things, and definitely our growing focus on sustainability. So maybe here's something to think about. How might this idea of essential paper keep redefining itself? And what kind of unique, high-value uses for paper might emerge as the industry keeps innovating beyond just traditional bulk printing?